Hello and welcome to this Workday webinar on modernizing your workforce and financial planning featuring Forrester Research. I am Tom McEvely, the Director of Product Marketing here at Workday, and I'll be the host of today's webinar. So if you are currently looking for ways that you can improve your organization's capabilities around planning, budgeting, and forecasting, then this webinar should be helpful to you. You'll be in the right place as we'll be discussing the challenges, solutions, and best practices with special guest Paul Hamerman. Paul is indeed one of the industry's best minds on this topic from Forrester Research. Had many great conversations with Paul on the topic of planning, budgeting, and forecasting, so we look forward to the conversation this morning. Now we're going to do introductions and review our agenda here in just a moment, but first a quick comment regarding forward-looking statements. So obviously, as this presentation may contain forward-looking statements, this safe harbor statement would apply. All right, with that, let's take a look at our guest speaker again this morning. And again, just as an introduction, I am Tom McEvely, Director of Product Marketing here at Workday. Been at Workday for about 4 years, but I've been in this industry for 25 years or so, mostly in financial technology and ERP. But it is actually a great pleasure to be joined on this call today with Paul Hamerman from Forrester Research. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourself and a little bit of your background and role.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity to be your guest speaker today on this webinar. I serve as an industry analyst at Forrester, where I've been for the past 18 years or so, and I focus on business application software. I analyze the overall technology trends in the software industry, including things like SaaS adoption, and I specialize in ERP applications, HR, finance applications, and also enterprise performance management, or EPM. And my EPM coverage is very pertinent to our discussion today because it includes the planning, reporting, and analysis functions that we're going to talk about. As an industry analyst, I author research articles and also advise clients on both the buyer and seller side of the software industry. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to be on this webcast with you today, Tom.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paul. It's great to have you with us. Now, let's take a look at quick look at our agenda. For those of you that are listening in, we've got about an hour blocked off. As we mentioned, we're going to take some questions if we have time at the end. Obviously, we've just done our first agenda item there with our introductions. Number two, we're going to really kick things off with Paul, and we're really going to set the scene and set the context of why planning is such a high priority. We know that it is. Obviously, everyone on this call, it's top of mind, so we're going to get Paul's perspective on why that is. Number three is we are going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into workforce planning and financial planning, particularly the linkages between the two of those, talk about the use cases and best practices as it relates to workforce and financial planning. Number four, it's not always just about planning, but in some cases it's about collecting the data and preparing to plan, right? Just getting to the starting line can sometimes be a challenge, so we're going to talk about that, best practices around that. Number five, we will talk about collaboration and participation in the planning process, right? As I always like to say, planning is a team sport. You've got to get people involved in that process, so we'll talk and get Paul's guidance on that as well. And then number six, we'll talk about performance management and reporting. As Paul mentioned, he's done a lot of research and writing in the area of enterprise performance management. We'll get his view and guidance around that topic as well. And then really as a courtesy to everyone on the call, we'll make sure everyone understands how Workday is really aligning to this agenda and best practices with our product offerings as well. And then, as I mentioned, time permitting, we'll get into some questions and answers as well. If you do have questions along the way, feel free to submit those at the Q&A widget at the bottom. We'll be collecting those, teeing them up for conversation at the end of today's prepared comments. All right. So with that, let's dive right into it. Really, again, as I mentioned, let's start at the top and let's talk about the why. We know from conversations with Workday customers and research that planning, budgeting, forecasting is critical, as is reporting analytics and performance measurement. But Paul, can you just sort of give us a sense of why this is and just provide some overall context and guidance for us?
Sure, Tom. I think the capabilities listed here are a pretty good overview of what we're talking about when we talk about enterprise performance management. which I regard as a business navigation system. So, when you prepare for a journey in your car, you need to consult your navigation system. That's going to tell you, how long it takes to get there, what's the best route, and what the traffic is like along the way. So that's your planning system. But then, as you go on your journey, you need to steer the vehicle with real-time information and continually adjust your course. And so we're talking here about analytics and dashboards that keep you informed about your business performance. And even we may get into some advanced capabilities that help you avoid accidents or even self-driving capabilities. And that's analogous to some of the advanced technology that's now showing up in EPM, such as machine learning and prescriptive guidance. And then you also need to know where you've been. So you need a rear-view mirror in your business. You need to know what's behind you. In business, it's important, or actually a requirement, to document the past performance in the form of financial results and comply with regulatory reporting requirements. So the accounting and reporting piece of this, or financial consolidation, is really about what happened in the past. So let me go into a little bit more detail. So I use this analogy of the three dimensions of time, past, present, and future, to describe this set of capabilities that we're talking about. So the disciplines of accounting and financial reporting are, by definition, about explaining what happened in the past using a very strict set of rules, which we call generally accepted accounting principles. So we consolidate our financial results using the financial consolidation functionality that we find in these systems. And we also prepare financial statements and regulatory reporting filings. In the present dimension, this is all about understanding what's happening right now in your business. The financial accounting and reporting systems don't really give us this insight in a timely manner. So to do this, we need analytical reporting capabilities and performance measures or scorecards to tell us how we're tracking against our goals and also against historical measures. And also, we need to focus on how we're going to perform in the future. So this is really the planning component. So we need to use a variety of planning techniques, including driver-based forecasting, budgeting, scenario planning, and also predictive modeling. So you need an integrated set of business applications to tie together these three time dimensions that give us insight and control into your cash flows and your revenue stream. And so an EPM solution provides coverage across all three of these time dimensions. Now let me also talk about how planning in particular is evolving in the digital age. So there's 5 trends I want to mention here. First of all is integrated planning. So all areas of the business, including finance and HR, need to execute against plans. In HR, for example, organizations need to plan around their headcount, around their salary and benefits costs, and also around their talent needs. Operations need demand and production plans. Marketing needs to plan how they invest in different marketing initiatives and branding initiatives. But there's also, what's key here is that businesses need to make sure that these plans are not siloed, but they're integrated and feed off one another. We also need to plan continuously. So we're moving away from annual budgets and monthly rolling forecasts. The pace of business today requires us to have plans that evolve more frequently. And really the state of the art now in planning is to have plans that are continuously updated based on input from the front lines as well as real-time data from your business systems. And so the planning activity also needs to be collaborative. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but the EPM tools are often deployed to a relatively small number of users, and I think it's essential to get other business stakeholders involved in this process rather than sending them spreadsheets via email. A fourth trend we're seeing is that planning is becoming more predictive. That is to say, we're able now to harness the computing power and advanced technology, algorithms, machine learning, and so forth to really create some predictive capabilities within these systems. And finally, the last innovation that I'm seeing is that the planning is becoming more strategic. That is, that strategic opportunities are revolving around growing the business in a variety of ways. and finance in particular, I think, has an important role to play in helping the business achieve strategic growth objectives, in addition to looking after costs, controls, and compliance.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. In fact, I'm just going to revert back to this slide here, which I've always got a lot of value out of in terms of your research. I did want to just remind the audience that, especially when we think about these sort of three lenses, the past, present, and the future, clearly Workday's applications, both on the HCM side, human capital management side, and the financial side, have always done a really nice job, especially in the first two. Traditionally, obviously the reporting, looking into the past, scorecarding, management reporting, the introduction of predictive analytics. But obviously now with our new Workday Planning product, which just came out in September, we're now able to really better support that future lens that Paul talked about. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then also, as I mentioned, on the predictive side, Paul, you had mentioned, that's now kind of coming into the frame with machine learning, and that's also something that Workday is trying to do as well, is harness the power of predictive analytics that we have. In fact, with planning, we now have capabilities to do some time series prediction based on events in the past. So, weaving all that into the mix is clearly important. So great. So let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about workforce planning. Clearly, many of our Workday customers and folks in the market know Workday as being a leader in HR and human capital management solutions. And so obviously there's a great interest in workforce planning. And sometimes when we talk to customers, Paul, about workforce planning, it can mean a lot of different things to different people in terms of use cases, how that ties into financial planning. So can you just share with the listeners some of your guidance as it relates to workforce planning?
Yeah, sure. I'll be glad to. So let's go to the next slide. So workforce planning and analysis, I think, is an often underutilized set of capabilities, but I think it has a number of interesting and innovative use cases. Now, the most common use of workforce planning is to understand the headcount and personnel costs, which really supports the financial planning process, in that people costs are really such a significant part of the operating costs of your business. And you should be able to model your people cost down to the employee or job level and have that model feed directly into your enterprise financial plan. Now, another type of planning that's, I think, very useful is strategic workforce planning, which is a longer range capability that helps you understand the talent requirements and constraints that impact your growth plans. In this use case, you can utilize labor market data to understand labor supply and costs in a particular geographic market, as well as demand factors and constraints in your business. And also, you want to understand the kind of talent and staffing needs you need to grow your business. And this type of planning, I think, is particularly useful for location-based, sort of brick-and-mortar type businesses like retail and hospitality, and also banking. Now, another use case that I think is common across many businesses is planning for mergers and acquisitions and other business changes to model the staffing impact of such events. And in addition to these types of planning functions, there's also a number of interesting analytical use cases that you should consider and can also develop with these tools. And these are things like talent review, where you can identify your top performers and assess the potential of your team members. You can do performance and productivity analysis, and here you can use operational data to analyze the productivity of your workforce and also understand capacity constraints related to your headcount. You can do predictive attrition analysis. That's actually what's depicted in this screenshot that's on this slide here. There's some very interesting and advanced use cases in the market now that leverage machine learning and predictive algorithms to determine who might leave your company and why. Also, we can predict candidate success in the talent acquisition process. And a new area of analytics related to people is employee engagement analytics, where we continually survey our employee population, understand their level of engagement and their sentiment related to working at the company, which I think right now is a pretty big priority for HR leaders.
Great, Paul. That's a great lead-in, and that's the visual down there. Indeed, is a Workday screenshot. Obviously, it looks like microfiche on this. For those of you that remember what microfiche is, it looks like microfiche on there. But indeed, you can actually see a full demo of all the Workday products up on Workday.com. So if you actually do want to see these things in action, go ahead and take a look at that. And Paul, I also just wanted to mention that we are also seeing some of our early adopters of Workday planning for workforce use cases doing that same thing in terms of using it to really drive an growth by an M&A strategy, right? Where they've got the shape of their workforce today by location, by skills, and then let's say they have a target company that they're looking to acquire. They can look at the roster of their team. In the due diligence process, they can bump that up against their own current workforce and kind of come up with different models. Where might we share offices? Where might we concentrate skill sets? What's the best mix of talent versus location, for example? So anyway, we have actually seen customers use Workday planning to do that type of M&A kind of restructuring analysis as well. So that's fantastic. So let's go to the and Paul, as you mentioned before too, that the flip side of this is always some type of financial planning. So the net effect in many cases of your workforce plan is some type of financial implication, whether that's location, whether it's real estate expenses, whether it's salaries and compensation, bonuses, what have you. There's usually going to be a ripple effect and an input into financial planning. So could you just sort of give the listeners just a little bit of context around financial planning, some of the use cases there, and again, the implications to strategic planning, as you mentioned before, and some of the best practices around that?
Okay, sure. So on this slide here, I've highlighted some pain points, which are really opportunities to improve the financial planning process and make it more efficient. So one of the things that's challenging about financial planning is there's really a lack of accuracy and predictability in some cases. And so plans and forecasts need to be dynamically adjusted to reflect changing market conditions, customer demands, competition, and other changes in the business. And often they're too static. There's a lot of effort that goes into preparing these plans, and the processes really aren't set up to support a continuous updating. So we need to have data-driven insights and modeling techniques that can drive performance outcomes more reliable rather than getting bogged down in complex plans that are developed in spreadsheets. Another challenge is that business information is often relatively stale. We have a lot of batch processes, batch interfaces, and lengthy processes to close the books. So, and we also have still a lot of ERP systems that are based on older technology and complicated and compliance-driven processes. So this creates latency and lags in business information. So what we need to do is move to a world where our sales, operational, and financial systems are connected real time, and that we can manage our business more effectively with insight that's based on data that's current. Another pain point is intermittent collaboration. We'll talk about collaboration a little bit here in a minute. It's traditionally been dependent on email as a transport mechanism where users need to open files, usually in the form of Excel spreadsheets, review them, and try to figure out what's going on in the business. So, we need to improve collaboration so that it's real time and it really supports a much more participative process. We're also challenged with a lack of strategic focus in planning processes, and by that I mean a lot of planning processes were created around a budgeting paradigm, which is really a stick to control costs in the business, rather than really focusing on the growth imperatives and focusing on the value of your customers and product innovation. We sometimes get bogged down in a lack of insight into the revenue stream, and so we need to align the results from different areas of the business so we can better understand the cause and effect. For example, you might see a downward trend in sales. And that may not actually be a problem of sales execution. It might actually be capacity constraints or supplier performance. So we need to be able to understand these things that impact our revenue stream. And also, finally, we need to have better insight into the workforce and trends in the people side of our business. And in most services businesses in particular, people costs are by far the biggest single line item and often represent more than 50% of your total operating costs. So we need to be able to understand the details and cost drivers for people costs, which can be done with better integration between your finance and HR systems and your finance and HR planning processes.
Yeah, Paul, that's great. I did want to just touch on one of the things you had mentioned about stale data, and that is that, one of the things, and we'll talk about it here in a minute when we talk about data prep and so forth, but that is one of the things that Workday has really tried to address head on, is that to the extent that Workday customers are using Workday HCM and Workday Financials, then when they need to, they can always build a plan or a driver-based model that has the always current headcount, right, by location, by supervisory org. They can always have the current, open recs, or they can always have, that current mix of contingent labor versus full-time labor. And so that is one of the things that I think Workday customers are really trying to drive and take advantage of is that real-time data. Same thing on the financial side, right, is the ability to have a plan and build a driver-based model that is always current as it relates to revenue or spend or assets and so forth. So, and we'll talk a little bit about some more of that in terms of data prep, but that ability to take advantage of in-memory and real-time is one of the things that, again, Workday Planning is addressing head-on. So great, let's talk a little bit about data process and prep. Most of the folks on this call, if you're involved in the planning process, you will certainly know and sympathize with the fact that sometimes just getting to the starting line is half the battle. Just getting your data in a place where it is current or current enough to plan on, making sure that all the organizational data, whether it's cost centers or supervisory orgs, is all consistent. So, Paul, what kind of guidance can you provide our listeners today on just data prep and integration and the whole process of getting prepared for planning?
Okay. I've got some thoughts on this slide about integration. And so in the context of planning and analysis and reporting, integration is really very important. I really think of it as a bridge or the glue that holds systems together so that you can have a seamless planning process. And most EPM systems on the market are dependent on a set of tools which may be embedded or supplied as a third-party add-on, which are used to load and cleanse data. And these are called ETL tools, which stands for extract, transform, and load. And it's pretty much a batch tool. That where you load data periodically into a planning system, and they're actually quite useful. But there are some other integration techniques to consider that enable more automated and also real-time data sharing, including API integration technology and live access to data that's stored in memory. So, with respect to integration, I mean, you should be looking for capabilities like first of all, ETL tools that are designed for business users, not for technical people, and those tools should be available to load data into the system from various other systems. You should also look for pre-built connectors, which are pretty common across cloud applications. So for example, connecting to a Salesforce system. You also want to see open API libraries. So, API is a really technical term which stands for Application Program Interface, and API libraries are public websites where software developers can go and access the integration specifications for a software application and actually write code that will facilitate the flow of data, sometimes in real time across systems. And finally, there's real-time data integration. And it's important to note that most EPM systems are not connected real-time to ERP and financial systems. Workday Planning is connected real-time to the underlying HR and financial systems, so it can rapidly access data that's stored real-time in the memory of the system.
Yeah, Paul, that's a great point, and we'll touch on that a little bit more. But that is one of the number one challenges that we've tried to address and sort of knock down with Workday Planning is basically eliminating the need for an external ETL capability when we're sitting on top of our own data, right? When Workday Planning is accessing, exactly as you mentioned, Workday HCM data, worker data, or financial data, because we're all in the same secure tenant, we can access that and bring that into a plan, a forecast, a budget, a driver-based model without any type of ETL. Obviously, there's a plan structure and a plan generator that we'll talk about here in a minute, but in terms of the need to extract that from another system, we've been able to minimize that. Now, again, we totally recognize that in some cases, not all that data exists within Workday. Paul, you had mentioned, Salesforce, and exactly as you mentioned, we've tried to make that easy as well. We have a prepackaged connector between Salesforce and Workday that you can find on the App Exchange, and that just makes it really easy for Workday customers to bring in data from Salesforce for all kinds of different purposes, for reporting, for revenue management, opportunity management, and so forth. So we've tried to make this as easy as possible. In some cases, we'll talk about that more here in a minute. All right, so let's talk about collaboration participation. As I always like to say, right, planning is a team sport. Plans don't create themselves, nor are they created by one person, right? There's lots of people involved, lots of cooks in the kitchen. There's versions. There's, just like that clip that we saw at the front of the webinar. Sometimes there's emailing going on. Sometimes it's all in Excel or Google Docs. So there's lots of different ways to try to pull people into the process. But Paul, what kind of guidance or coaching can you provide to our listeners today on sort of the whole process of collaboration and participation?
Okay, so I agree with you that planning is a team sport, but there's no limit on the number of players that you can put onto the playing field. And I think the more participation you have, the better it is. So let's look at participation and collaboration. And before I get on to collaboration, now let me talk about participation. I mean, planning processes are typically limited to finance people or department heads, but I think it's even better if you can get the process into the hands of more people that are on the front lines of your business. People like sales managers or project managers, because they have the best knowledge of what's happening on the front lines of your business, particularly from a revenue standpoint. And so now collaboration is a set of capabilities that enhances participation and enables broader participation across the business. So we often collaborate via email or instant messaging, but that collaboration is often disconnected from the business process itself. The modern form of collaboration that you're seeing more and more in business applications like Workday is threaded discussions in the context of the process. And this, of course, borrows from the consumer world of social networking in terms of the style of communication, and it is real time within the application. So in an EPM solution, you want to see several collaboration capabilities. First of all, you want to see real-time collaboration via threaded discussions, but also including notifications and alerts, that help engage you in the conversation. You want a visual environment for monitoring the status of a planning or reporting process. So planning is a process where companies often delegate certain elements of the plan to different participants. And so you want a set of monitoring capabilities so you know the status of the overall process and the status of the individual tasks that have been delegated, and you want this to be delivered in the form, ideally, of a visual dashboard, so you know where the process is at any given point in time. And a final point is that you want to avoid the need to carve off spreadsheets from the plan and send them to participants via email, because this is a very inefficient way of collaboration, and it's also hard to control.
Yeah, that's great. And Paul, we've seen the same thing with our customers as well. I mean, one of the interesting things about Workday's approach is, especially when a customer has deployed Workday Human Capital Management, what we essentially have there is like a built-in distribution channel or a built-in participation channel, right? Where our product knows the organization, right? The supervisory org. We know who reports to who. We understand everyone's security permissions, and so we're able to like invite them into the planning process or get them involved in the planning process within context. And so we've really seen Workday customers take a great advantage of that. Just as you mentioned, I mean, if you want to try to drive accountability down to the line level, or participation where people really know what's happening and how to drive results, we've seen customers use that distribution within Workday to do that. And then I think the other thing too that's interesting is, a lot of folks on this call probably are familiar with planning tools that are licensed by the seats, like for the chosen few. And so that's one of the reasons why we see Excel proliferate, is people, Excel is like the freeware version of like a planning product, that combined with email. Whereas, there's only like a very small number of people that might be licensed for the true planning product. And so Workday has taken a different approach there, and not to get into the minutia on pricing models, but we do believe in the democratization of the process, meaning as long as our customers set up their security model and their permissions the way they want to, they should be able to decide who is involved in the planning process. And so we've seen customers take advantage of that and really get more and more people involved in the process, not only of contributing to the plan, but then also, monitoring the plan and the status of that going forward. So that's great. So we've got that, and then really, as it relates to performance management and reporting, one of the things that I like to say is, the whole purpose of having a plan is to achieve the plan, right, or to maybe overachieve the plan. And so you need to know where you're at relative to your targets. What is my variance, of my plan or my forecast relative to actuals? And so that, we're talking about scorecards, we're talking about dashboards, we're talking about the ability to make business adjustments to get back on plan. But Paul, what kind of guidance can you provide our audience today regarding the reporting and performance measurement aspects of planning?
Sure. I mean, this is a very important set of capabilities that you're looking for in an EPM system, and it takes several forms. Financial reporting in particular is an essential tool of the business, and you need to have periodic financial statements because they're a requirement to document the historical performance according to generally accepted accounting principles, and also comply with the disclosure requirements that public companies have to adhere to. So EPM solutions typically include a financial consolidation and financial reporting component specifically for this purpose. Now, in addition, there's a variety of operational and management reporting needs that are addressed as well, which incorporate information from various parts of the business, including sales, operational, HR data, and so forth. And I think in this case, visualization of the information is very important. Whereas financial statements are pretty much columns and rows of numbers. When you get into this kind of operational and management reporting, it's really very important to visualize this data in the form of charts and graphs and scorecards. And so management reporting and analysis typically uses business metrics and KPIs as well as dashboards to illustrate the performance of the business at any point in time. And also with the latest technology, we can have the system give us predictive insights and prescriptive intelligence using some of the advanced technologies like algorithms, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on that we're starting to see come into play. So what you should look for, I think, in a modern EPM system related to reporting and performance analytics are, first of all, live analytics that are visualized in the context of your HR and finance and operational processes. I mean, these should be essentially real-time analytics that are pervasively part of the user experience. You also want to be able to generate management reporting packages to inform leaders about business results. And these are generally presentation quality packages that are specific to the needs of business stakeholders that are automatically generated by the system. We also want to be able to consume these analytics on mobile devices, including tablets and smartphones, where we can optimize the experience for touch and also allow a user to explore details underneath the charts. And then finally, we want to be able to stand up intuitive dashboards and KPIs that are specific to the business, and not only the business, but the industry that you play in, and have a set of KPIs that are very relevant to how you run your business. So if we move forward here and just kind of summarize the set of capabilities that we've been talking about over the last several minutes, there are a number of things that you want to have in an enterprise planning and EPM system. The first thing that I think is important is that the system should be delivered as software as a service, which Workday is, because I really believe that the software as a service model really optimizes not only rapid implementation, but continuous updating of the system, so you're always on the latest version. We want a planning and performance system that delivers versatile capabilities so that you can model and report on any aspect of the business and on any type of business. We also want to leverage analytic and reporting technologies that provide real-time and predictive insights into the business. We want to be able to leverage also the simplicity of consumer-grade mobile experiences with these systems to help distribute the business results to a wide audience. We want to embed real-time collaboration and process management capabilities within this application platform. We certainly want to be able to integrate across multiple systems from on-premises to cloud, and also leverage real-time data. And finally, we want to be able to support business stakeholders across the enterprise in key areas of the business, like HR, like sales, like operations, like marketing, so that we have a planning system that really supports a 360-degree view of the business.
Yeah, that's great, and that is a great summary, Paul. And it's so interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about Workday Planning here in a moment and how we line up to this summary, but it's a great list. I mean, in fact, literally point by point, this is essentially really where Workday products are aligned, and again, customers are taking great advantage of that. So just a quick checkpoint. We're right on time. We're going to do a quick overview of how Workday's solutions are lining up to these introductory remarks. We will be taking some time for questions and answers at the end of the prepared remarks. So if you do have questions as they're popping into your mind, feel free to drop them down to the Q&A widget, and Paul and I are happy to answer those again at the end of today's prepared remarks. So real quick, really just as a courtesy for everyone on the call, when we think about Workday and how we are lining up to everything that Paul's been talking about and everything that we've been talking about as it relates to workforce and financial planning, indeed, we now do have a enterprise planning application that's, as you can see, they're just nicely situated in between financials and human resources. This is a bird's eye view of Workday's business platform. These are the many different capabilities and applications that our customers are deploying. And really, it's important to note Workday Planning was introduced, generally available in September of last year in Workday 27. And so now it's really a great complement to what our customers have deployed as it relates to human capital management as well as financial management. And so it's been a really nice addition to our portfolio, and in many cases, really an ultimate bridge between the HR and the finance team. Now, one of the things that you may know, especially if you've had a chance to listen to any of Workday's publicly available earnings call, you've heard our CEO, Aneel Bhusri, talk about how Workday Planning is indeed one of Workday's most successful product launches. We've had great interest and uptake of Workday Planning across many different industries and many different market segments. Again, the common denominator for all the different logos that you see here, these are Workday customers that are deploying Workday HCM, Human Capital Management, or Workday Financial Management, and then they're adding Workday Planning on top of those and being able to take advantage of all the things that Paul and I have been talking about in terms of real-time data, whether it's worker data, compensation data, financial data, revenue, spend, what have you. If Workday applications are enabling those transactions and that information, then Workday Planning can take advantage of that. So again, fantastic momentum within our customer base on our Workday Planning product. And really, I would say one of the fundamental reasons why is because, and we've mentioned this a couple times on the webinar, but it's worth repeating, that what you're seeing there on the left side of the screen is the classic problem that we are addressing head on. And especially for the listeners on this webinar that have been in the planning space for a number of years, you've essentially been experiencing this fence jumping situation, right? Where you've got either workers and your financial data in one system, right? And then you've got your planning in a separate system. And when I say system, for planning or budgeting and forecasting, that might be Excel. But the fact is that you're in the business of moving data around, whether it's mirroring your worker data, your open positions, your headcount from your HR system into a planning system, or whether it's moving and summarizing, aggregating your financial data and moving into a planning system. Maybe you're mirroring your supervisory orgs, your cost centers, your fiscal periods, your reporting dimensions in two different systems. But the fact is that this has just sort of been the nature of the beast, for many years, right? Whereas with Workday, we are taking a fundamentally different approach to this business problem. And again, as we mentioned before, when Workday customers are using our planning product, they're already in the same secure tenant with all their transactions and with all their reporting. We've been able to greatly reduce that dependency on ETL that Paul talked about because, again, our customers are doing that workforce planning, that financial planning in the same system that already has all the data, the cost centers, the supervisory orgs, the transactions, the fiscal periods. There's no need to reset that up in a separate system. The same thing on the security side. We can engage participants in the planning process or distribute reporting in a secure way with one security model. So some real advantages to that, again, that our customers are taking advantage of. Now, just at a very high level, bird's eye view, if we were just to take a look at the planning lifecycle that we're supporting, it all starts, as I talked about before, with those systems of record, whether it's human capital management or financials. And then obviously our planning product is supporting what you might expect, which is the creation of a baseline plan, whether it's a workforce headcount plan, whether that's an income statement, some type of capital plan, the ability to create that baseline plan through something called a plan generator, and then collaborate, iterate, do various driver-based models around that plan, create and distribute a driver-based model and a plan based on that baseline information. And then at some point, the plan, as everyone knows on this call, usually there's some horse trading going on with planning. You start with a high or medium and low scenario, and then eventually you've got to submit a plan and then execute against that plan. And just as Paul mentioned, you need to be able to get various stakeholders involved out to the edges of your organization involved in that. And then at the end of the day, you need to measure your performance against that plan, maybe make adjustments to both your business or the plan on an ongoing basis and continue to iterate that on an ongoing basis. So this just gives you a high-level overview of the business process that we're supporting with Workday Planning. Now, if you came into this call saying, oh my gosh, I really wanted to see a demo or see some product, you can do that. This is just a screenshot of what the Workday Planning UI looks like. But for more information, definitely visit Workday.com. You can see demos of workforce planning as well as financial planning and how they interrelate on Workday.com. So check it out if you're interested in workforce planning. Just take a look at our products menu there, and then within the human capital management menu, you'll find workforce planning. Again, you can get full information, either a short demo or an extended demo on those use cases. Same thing for financial planning, right? And the interrelationships between the two. You can find all that information as well out on the Workday product pages. So for more information, feel free to take a look at that. All right, and with that, we're right on time. We've got about 10 minutes left, Paul, so for some Q&A. Paul, what do you think? Are you ready to take some questions from the audience and keep it lively here?
Yeah,
all right. All right, so just starting things off. So I've got a question here on this kind of notion of continuous planning. So, and Paul, you had even mentioned this whole concept of sort of many planning processes started with like an annual budgeting paradigm, but really need to be involved in a more fluid, continuous planning process. So the question here is, how are organizations using IMC and real-time data to drive a more continuous planning process rather than the sort of annual budgeting process? What do you think about that?
Okay, so, yeah, so, I mean, a lot of companies have found that a periodic planning and budgeting process really doesn't support the dynamic nature of their business. And so they may have evolved to rolling forecast, which is a little bit more iterative, where they might update the data, monthly or so to reflect actual results. But continuous planning is a much more iterative process where the plan and forecast is always kept up to date, and which can show you how your actual and planned expenditures are tracking real time, and how your revenues are flowing in, and how the business is progressing. So with a continuous process, you can leverage real-time data and also modern integration where you can plumb data in from other systems on a much more frequent basis. And so you can actually let the computer do a lot of updating of the plans. But also a second aspect of it is participation and really getting more people involved and getting them to keep the system up to date in terms of deal probabilities and project status and things like that.
Great. That's great. Fantastic. We've got another question coming in here as it relates to decentralized processing, and I can take a stab at this one, Paul, but the question here is, our company operates in a decentralized manner where different regions and departments have a fair amount of autonomy, right? So they need to drive a structured planning process, but still do that within like a distributed organization. I'd welcome Paul's thoughts on this as well. Just wanted to mention that with Workday Planning, we have now taken that into consideration with our product. So as most of the people on the call may know or should know, we release a new update with Workday twice a year, so every 6 months. And in fact, in our latest release, Workday 28, we do now have some features to support decentralized or distributed planning, right, where you can have different roles within your organizations involved in the planning process. It's not just like the central FP&A team or the HR team and then the plan input. You might have different roles in the organization where you parse out sections of the plan based on cost center or based on the supervisory org, distribute that out, and then basically have different departments fill out their sections of the plan, if you will, and then roll it all up. And that requires some orchestration and business process governance to support that type of distributed or decentralized planning. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that that is obviously something that we're supporting with Workday Planning. It tends to be maybe more common in larger organizations that have that type of distributed or decentralized approach. But Paul, any guidance on that from your perspective in terms of best practices?
Yes, I think the workflow and process management capabilities is very important when you want to delegate tasks and orchestrate a participative process where you have a number of different input points. But there's also decentralized planning in the sense that a number of business organizations that may be subsidiaries or lines of business or departments may want to develop their own plans. And I think that's fine. I mean, I think that, these are very versatile planning tools. You can do a lot with them. You can do all different kinds of plans in all different parts of the business. But I think, one thing that will help is to tie the plans back together at some level, usually at a summary level, so that you can, consolidate the planning up to a corporate level so they can have a full view of the business.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's right. And we've got another question here that's an interesting one, right, which is related to Excel. The question here, the comment, Paul, here is, although we've deployed a point solution for planning, budgeting, and forecasting, we still rely very heavily on Excel for ad hoc analysis. What recommendations do you have regarding how we can migrate away from Excel? I'll just take a first stab at this and then turn it over to Paul. But we have obviously seen this in many cases. I think we've seen Excel continue to perpetuate for a couple different reasons. One is because it is sort of the every person tool. Most financial analysts and HR analysts know how to use it as long as you can get the data in there. There's sophisticated function library. It's very flexible. So there's sort of no end to the iterations that you can do within Excel. So what we've tried to do within Workday to try to help customers kind of wean themselves from that reliance on Excel is embed directly within Workday something that looks like Excel. It's essentially a spreadsheet with a full function library. So all your favorite functions, whether it's VLOOKUP or MPV functions or sophisticated finance functions, all that is directly within Workday worksheets. And then the plan data comes into that worksheet, all within the secure Workday tenant. So it's not outside of Workday. It's not a plugin. It's not a Google Doc. It's all within Workday's secure tenant. And then you can bring your Workday data into that and then do various modeling and ad hoc analysis directly within that. And what that's allowed customers to do then is sort of get the best of both worlds. They can perform structured distributed planning, both for workforce as well as financial use cases, but then also be able to use Workday worksheets, which sort of gives them all the abilities around Excel to do that ad hoc analysis. And the same thing, they can, we also have various demos on this on Workday.com, but you can also ingest an external spreadsheet directly within Workday. And it'll actually decompose that spreadsheet. It'll take the data, the functions, the formatting, all the math that was in that previously external spreadsheet and bring it into Workday, and then you can then use it within the secure confines of Workday. That's just one way we've been able to help customers essentially wean themselves from dependency and some of the compliance issues related to Excel. But Paul, any comments around the perpetuation of Excel out there in the market?
Yeah, so I don't think that your objective here is to eliminate the use of Excel. I mean, I think you really have to coexist with it, and you have to harness Excel in some cases as a user experience within the planning application. And so there needs to be some kind of interoperability with Excel where you can upload an Excel model, or you can use Excel as literally as a user experience and as a window into the planning model. And so it can also be used as a delivery mechanism for consuming data that comes out of the planning system. So I think we're never really going to eliminate Excel. We need to coexist with it, and we need to find ways to incorporate it into the planning process without creating some of the data control problems and data integrity problems that a pure Excel environment would have.
Yeah, that's great coaching for everyone, and definitely Workday in our user experience teams, we've really tried to kind of create that best of both worlds with that worksheet that's embedded directly within Workday, but then also exactly as you mentioned, Paul, the ability to ingest a spreadsheet and then basically give people all the comfort of that, but directly within Workday. So that's great. Now I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so we want to pulled the train into the station right on time. Really, I hope this webinar was helpful to you, especially as you're looking to modernize your workforce and financial planning processes. I want to extend a very gracious thank you to our special guest, Paul Hamerman from Forrester Research, for his comments, guidance, and coaching on this call. And really, on behalf of all of us at Workday, this is Tom McEvely saying thank you for your attendance on today's webinar and your interest in Workday's solution. If you do want more information, again, on Workday's planning product, including a full demo, check out workday.com. You can find all the information out there. All right, thanks, and have a great Workday.